Assalamu alaikum, dear students. I'm hoping that you all are totally well and fine and must be taking proper care of yourselves. So, dear students, we are still on our journey of completing the software, the topic of software. We are done with system software, application software. Thankfully, we are done with the internet applications, and now we are moving on towards the generally categorized softwares. So, the main aim and objective of our today's lecture is to focus on the types of generally categorized softwares, such as licensed softwares, open source softwares, shareware softwares, and freeware softwares. So in our today's lecture, we would be covering the concepts of these four types of generally categorized softwares. So the first and foremost type of a generally categorized software about which we would be talking right now is the licensed software. So what is a licensed software? You can easily guess that from its name, something to do with a license. So, a licensed software is a proprietary software distributed under a licensing agreement to authorized user. Means it involves a license. In easy words, we can say that when some software developer or software engineer develops a software, now that software developed by, let's say, Mr. A, now that software is the legal property of that Mr. A. That software is the legal property, or you can say that software has or the copyrights of that software has been owned by that Mr. A. That software cannot be used or cannot be purchased by some other person until and unless Mr. A actually authorizes that person to do so. So if something like a book or piece of music or some brand or some design is invented by some other person, is the innovation of some other person. So that person has got the copyrights of that thing. But in order to get the proper legal copyright of your own invention, you need to patent that thing, P-A-T-E-N-T, patent that thing, or you need to register that thing. If I've developed some software or app or application, I would, in order to get the copyrights, legal copyrights of my own invention or creation, I would patent or legally register that thing with the software association, with the relevant association. Now I have got the copyrights of my invention, my software. Nobody on earth can actually use my software without my permission, without my license. So now I've got the copyrights of my invention or creation. Now that software, this means that that software actually has got licensed by the owner of that creation, by the owner of that software. And if some other party wants to use that software in order to purchase or get that software, that party has to get its license. Softwares generally have they are available with the license over any websites. If you agree with the terms and conditions of the license, you tick the checkbox of the license over a web page over the internet, you can easily get that licensed software. So basically, licensed software is the legal property, is the legal you can say that the legal copyrighted stuff of some owner, some creator, some inventor. That's why we say that licensed software is a proprietary software, can be used for business purposes, by the creator or inventor or developer of that software, but under a licensing agreement. That licensing agreement or that license is actually there to enable or authorize common users to actually enable them to use that software. So it involves private modifications, copying and republishing restrictions. A licensed or copyrighted software is actually restricted by the owner, or has got some restrictions by the owner, that software could not be modified. Means the modification can only be done, or the updation of the features of the software can only be done by the developer or the actual owner or inventor of that software, but the user cannot do any modifications inside the software, or cannot copy the software, or cannot republish that software. So these are some restrictions actually affiliated with licensed software. Proprietary software is a computer software which is the legal, actually proprietary means which is the legal property of one person, of one organization, of one party. Let's suppose I'll take an example of Microsoft. The softwares of Microsoft, like Microsoft Word, which is also called as MS Word, can be abbreviated as MS Word or MS Excel or MS Paint. Now these softwares are the legal property of not one person, but they are the legal property of one organization, and that organization is Microsoft. So the terms of use for other parties or other organizations is defined by contracts or licensing agreements. These terms may include various privileges to share, alter, disassemble and use the software and its code. So the licensing agreement or the license of that software covers all these things, that who can share the software, or somebody can share the software or not, somebody can alter the software or not, somebody can disassemble the software or not, somebody can use the code of the software or not. So licensing agreement covers all these stuff. All these permissions are either granted or either not granted by the licensed software. So the proprietary software refers to the software which is owned by an individual or a company. So there are restrictions on the distribution of a licensed software, and there are restrictions on the use of a licensed software. License actually restricts or actually implements certain kind of restrictions relevant to republishing, relevant to copying, relevant to modifications, relevant to sharing, relevant to alteration or disassembling or use of its code, etc. So it is also sometimes known as closed source or commercial software. So a licensed software can also be called as a closed source software or commercial software. Why it is called as a commercial software? Commercial means any software which can be used for business purposes, means the creator or owner or the developer of that software actually you can say that sells it into the market or presents that software into the market under the terms of a license in order to sell that software to the customer, protected by the license. Means the owner wants that the user or the common user inside the market can use his software, but he does not want that user to do any modifications or copying or any republishing stuff or any extra alteration or sharing stuff with that software. He just wants that user to purchase and use that software. And why it is called as closed source software? Because the source code which is used by the software developer in order to develop that licensed software, that's behind the scenes source code is is not made available by the developer of that software, by the creator or inventor of that software. That's why the licensed software is also called as a closed source software, because it's source code written in some kind of high level language. That source code is not made available by the owner or creator of that software. In order to deeply understand the concept of a licensed software, you need to understand what is a software license. So, a software license is an agreement between you and the owner of a software program that gives an individual, company or organization permission to use a software program. So a software license defines the rights of the software developer and the rights of the user. When a user purchases software, he is allowed to use the software. Means when a person purchases the software developed by any developer or software engineer, the user is allowed to use the software, which means he is not the owner of the user, but the license bounds that user or gives that freedom to the user to use that software. But the license of the software does not give that permission to the user to alter, modify, or copy or reproduce or republish that software. While the license actually allows the inventor, creator, or the developer or the owner of the software to do whatever he wants to do with his software. He can modify the source code, he can alter, he can disassemble, he can do whatever he wants with the software. So the license actually defines the limits for a user or for a creator. Generally, all the system software and application software, all types of system and application softwares are licensed. The software license deals with the copyright law. So the owner of the or the creator or the inventor of the software actually has got the copyrights of that software. Means now nobody else can use his software or reproduce or share or alter his software without his permission, because he has got the copyrights. Now, what is actually a copyright law? So, copyright law prevents illegal copying of computer software. It allows creator, inventor, or the owner of a computer software to benefit financially from his software and to retain some control over how it is used. When the software is given away free of cost, it makes it difficult for the software creator, for the software owner to stay in business. Means if a software developer is developing a software by the day and night hard work, and afterwards he just gives his software free of cost in the market to the customer, so he cannot stay in the business, because if he is giving that software free of cost, now what would he earn? So software that is copied and sold without the permission of the owner is known as a pirated software. Means the software that is copied and sold without the permission of the owner is known as a pirated software, and it is violation of copyright. The software license usually answers questions such as where and how often can you install the program? Can you copy, modify, or redistribute that software? Can you look at the underlying source code or not? So these are some of the questions which are satisfied by the software license, or software license actually covers all these questions or covers all these limitations for the user. Some of the advantages associated with the licensed software are stability. Its releases are stable throughout and the software does not crash easily. Another advantage of a licensed software is that it is reliable. It can be relied upon during handling of critical processes. It is unique. It is unique in nature and does not have much alternatives. Of course, every software developer who develops a new software actually keeps that thing in view, that his software should be unique when it comes to certain features. Some of the features of his software should be unique, which should not be available in other softwares inside the market. Another advantage of licensed software is its compatibility, that it is compatible with many operating systems. You need to remember that if we are talking about a licensed application software, an application software which is licensed, so of course you need to know that the application softwares actually run on the platform of an operating system. So a licensed application software can be a software which is actually compatible with certain types of operating systems, like the operating systems of Apple computers, the operating systems of Microsoft computers, etc., etc. Another very important advantage related with the licensed software is its scalability. Scalability here means that these softwares can be added with different features, can be added with new features over the passage of time by the owner or creator or developer of the software. Means the software can be updated with the passage of time, with new interfaces, with new features. Means licensed softwares are exposed to growth. Some of the disadvantages of licensed software are that they are costly in nature. Of course, they are licensed, so that's why they are costly. They must be costly. The source code of the licensed software is not accessible to a common user for modifications, for alterations, for changes, because the source code for that software has been developed by the original owner or creator or original software developer of that software. So that original creator or owner or software developer only knows the source code, and he does not share that source code with the user. He is giving that developed software to the user just for use, not for modifications, not for alterations in the source code. Another disadvantage of licensed softwares is that the redistribution or copying of the licensed software is forbidden for the user who is purchasing that licensed software from the market. That user cannot create copies of that licensed software. The redistribution is only allowed to the creator or the original owner of that software. Some examples of the proprietary or some examples of the licensed softwares are Macintosh operating system. As told you earlier, that licensed softwares can be application softwares or can be system software. So system software has a type called as an operating system. So if you talk about the licensed operating systems, so Macintosh is the licensed operating system, is the licensed software which is owned by the Apple company. Likewise, all the versions of Microsoft Windows, like Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, all the versions of Microsoft Windows are actually licensed softwares. Adobe packages or Adobe softwares are also licensed softwares. Microsoft Office, like MS Word, MS Excel, MS Paint, MS Project, MS Outlook, all these are also licensed softwares. So now the next type of generally categorized software which we would be talking about is an open source software. Now, what is an open software? When we talked about the licensed software, the name was indicating that that software was something to do with a license. Now here the name is an open source software. You can easily get that hint that here that software has something to do with the source code which is openly available. So what is an open source software? It is a computer software that is available in the form of source code, that allows the users to study, change and improve that freely available open source code on any of the organization's website. Open source software is free for inspection. Open source software, the source code of open source software is free for inspection and changes and modifications and distribution in order to improve the software. Open source software is generally a team effort where dedicated programmers improve upon the source code. They use the source code because the source code is freely available, and they share the changes within the community of the programmers or developers. So the open source software is the software that is available to users with free source code. As we talked about earlier in licensed softwares, that a licensed software can be used by the user after purchasing, but that user cannot change or modify or cannot even see the source code of that licensed software. The user has nothing to do with the source code developed by the developer of that software, while that is the case is opposite in open source software. That is a software whose source code, behind the scenes source code, is available to the user. The user can see that software's source code. The user can modify, change or redistribute that software's source code. So the user's source code is freely available to copy, learn and share. An open source software can either be free of cost or it can be chargeable. Means any company who is giving you an access to the source code of its software, they can give you that source code. They can give that access to you. They can give access to you to their source code either free of cost, either they can charge you with some money, that if you are using their source code, they can say that pay us this much money. So some of the advantages associated with open source software are that their security is very much better than the other type of softwares. They provide high levels of security. They are affordable. In some cases, as they are free of cost available, their source code is available free of cost. They are transparent. Why we are saying that open source softwares are transparent? Because their source code is visible to any type of users. Their source code is transparent. They are interoperable on multiple platforms. Means they have high level of compatibility with the different types of platforms. Means open source softwares are compatible with the multiple types of platforms, with multiple types of hardwares, with other types of softwares too. Open source softwares are flexible due to customizations. Customization means that user can do customizations or changes or alterations or modifications in the source code of that software. That's why they are called as flexible. While localization is possible in open source software. Localization means whoever is using the source code of the open source software, that software developer or that user can actually modify or customize that open source software according to his own local needs, according to the local needs of his local device, according to the needs of his local device. Means the user can modify the source code of the open source software according to the needs of his local device, according to the needs of his own things. So the examples of open source software are Linux operating system. The biggest example of an open source software is Linux. So another example of an open source software is Apache HTTP web server, Mozilla's Firefox web browser. Nowadays people mostly use Google Chrome web browser for browsing the internet, or either Mozilla's Firefox web browser. Likewise, Thunderbird email client, database system, GNU compiler collection, Moodle, OpenOffice, PHP Perl. So these are some of the open source softwares which are open to use, and their source code can be altered, modified, and changed by the user at any time. Now, after licensed software, after an open source software, we would be talking about the third type of a generally categorized software, and that is shareware software. Again, like a licensed software, like an open source software, the name is indicating, the name of that software is hinting towards the sharing. Shareware must be a software which has something to do with sharing. Now, what type of sharing, we would find it out. So, shareware software is a software that is freely distributed to users on trial basis. There is a time limit inbuilt in the software. For example, you can say that you are using an antivirus. You have downloaded that antivirus software from the internet, and that antivirus software is actually displaying a message that you can use that antivirus software for 30 days, for 2 months, or for 60 days. But after those 60 days, you have to pay for that software. If you want, after 60 days, if you want to use that antivirus software, you have to pay for that. But until those 60 days, until those 2 months, or until those 30 days, you can use that antivirus software totally free. So as the time limit gets over, it will be deactivated. That antivirus software, or that shareware software, will be deactivated automatically. So to use it after the time limit, after those 60 days or after those 30 days, you have to pay for that shareware software. Or we can say that shareware software is given to the people free of cost, free of charge, for a limited time period. After the expiry date, or after the you can say that allotted or assigned time, or after the assigned duration, this shareware software should be purchased for further usage. Shareware is a trial version. You can say it as a trial version, and its functionality is limited. There are some types of shareware software which are available as full version, but they automatically stop working at the end of the trial period. So the trial period is usually 30 or 60 days. Some shareware softwares can be downloaded from the internet. A software that is initially free and can be distributed to others as well, but needs to be paid for after a stipulated period of time, is called as a shareware software. Its source code is also not available. Like a licensed software, its source code is totally not available and hence cannot be modified. Shareware is also popular with gamers, as it gives them a chance to try a new game on a limited time basis before purchasing the full version. Many shareware products are legitimate. So shareware are of following types. You can just have an introduction with the basic concepts of these types of shareware software. So the types of a shareware are adware. Adware is a type of shareware software which contains ads or advertisements to generate revenue for the developers. Another type is donationware. Donationware is a type of shareware software whose payment is optional. Means after the expiry date of the allotted or assigned duration, like 60 or 30 days, it is optional for the user to pay or not pay. Then another type is nagware. It reminds the user to purchase the license or the software. Another type is freemium, free for non-premium but of cost for premium features. Means freemium is a type of shareware software whose common features means which allows the use of some of its common features to the user without any time limit, without any expiry date of the time limit, but its exclusive or prominent or premium features cannot be used without purchasing the software. So if a user wants to use the exclusive features or prominent features or very advantageous features of a freemium shareware software, in order to do so, the user has to purchase that software. Then another type is demoware. It is a demonstration version. It is further classified as crippleware and trialware. Crippleware, some features are disabled under the time limit duration, and some of the features are available to the user, while some are totally disabled until and unless the user purchases that crippleware shareware software. Then another is trialware. In this type of shareware software, all features are available under the time limit duration. Means if a user is using the trial version for 30 or 60 days, during those 30 or 60 days, all the features, either exclusive features, prominent features, either common features, all the features, all the options of that trialware shareware software would be available to the user. After those 30 or 60 days, the user would have to pay for those features or pay for that software if the user further wants to actually use that trialware shareware software. Why users prefer shareware? Users prefer shareware software because of the following reasons, like shareware softwares are available free of cost. Some of I would not say all the shareware are available free of cost. Some of the types of shareware, like trialware, are at least available. All of the features of trialware shareware are actually available free of cost for like 30 to 60 days. And sharewares also help to know about the product before buying it. Means a very prominent feature of shareware software is that they allow the user to actually use the software before going for it, before purchasing it. Some examples of freeware, some examples of shareware are like some sort of antivirus softwares like AVG antivirus software, many sorts of firewalls or disk cleaners, or etc. etc. So the last type of generally categorized software is freeware software. We talked about licensed softwares, we talked about open source softwares, we talked about shareware softwares, and now we are talking about the freeware softwares. Like all the other types of softwares, the name is indicating that this is a type of software which has something to do with free of cost. So freeware is a software which is available for use free of cost. It is usually full version software for an unlimited period of time. It is not like shareware. In shareware software, the software was available, or some of the features or limited features of shareware software were actually available for a limited period of time like 30 to 60 days, and afterwards the user has to pay for that shareware software if the user actually wanted to use that software or liked that software. So freeware is usually a full version of the software for an unlimited period of time. This software may have restrictions in terms of use. For example, it may be allowed for personal or academic use only, or for a non-profit use only. So freeware software does not actually bound the user to pay for it because it is free of cost, but it actually bounds the user in terms of usage, like for personal use, for academic use, for a non-profit use, and it does not bound the user when it comes to the time period, while the shareware actually bounds the user if the user is freely using the software. It bounds the user for 30 or 60 days trial period. So we can say that a freeware is a software that is available free of cost for use and as well as distribution, but cannot be modified as its source code is not available. Means freeware software can be used free of cost for unlimited time period. It can be distributed, it can be shared with other people too. It allows its user to actually make its further copies for distribution. But one thing which it does not allow is its type of use, like for personal or academic use, as well as it does not allow the user to access its source code. Examples of freeware are like Google Chrome, Adobe Acrobat, PDF readers, Skype. You know, Skype is a type of software through which you can do live audio video sessions for communication. Likewise, freeware software is a software that is available totally free of cost. Any user can download freeware from the internet and can use it. These softwares do not provide any freedom of modifying, sharing and studying the program or studying the software as it happens in open source software. Means the freeware software does not allow the user to access its source code, does not allow the user to modify, change or alter its source code. Freeware is also called a closed source software because, like a licensed software, the user cannot access its source code. Why users prefer freeware softwares? This happens because of the following reasons, like freewares are preferred because of their free of cost thing. They are available free of cost. They are also preferred by the users because freewares can be distributed or shared free of cost. They are not like licensed softwares. Licensed softwares actually forbid the distribution of software. Some examples of freeware software are like Skype, Viber, web browser like Google Chrome, and Adobe PDF reader, Yahoo Messenger, Google Talk, MSN Messenger, etc., etc. Now moving on towards, as we are done with the major concepts of these softwares, like we are done with the concepts of licensed softwares, open source softwares, shareware and freeware softwares. Now we would talk about the major differences between some of these types. Like first of all, we will talk about the differences between a freeware and shareware software. So what are the differences? Differences are like freeware software is free of cost, while when it comes to shareware software, they are free of cost for a specific period of time, like for 30 or 60 days. But after that time duration expires, the user has to pay for the shareware software if that user further wants to use that software. Freeware softwares does not allow or does not cover all the copyright issues, while the shareware softwares also So the freeware software these softwares are not always like licensed. They are sometimes not licensed, and they do not cover all the copyright issues. While the shareware softwares they are also type of licensed, or they allow licensing to some extent, or they cover the copyrights to some extent. Freeware softwares are fully functional, means all their features can be fully used by the customers or users, while when it comes to shareware, certain features are provided for trial time duration, for on trial basis, while after the trial duration expires, the features are not available for certain use. When it comes to freeware, all the copyright laws are retained. User license is important to the user in order to access the freeware. Means when it comes to the license, as we have already said that to some extent license actually exists here. When some license exists, so the user has to agree with the license terms in order to use the freeware software. While the shareware is a more limited version and is also restricted by the license, it also is restricted by the license. After the designated trial period, if the user wants to continue with the use, it is the infringement of copyright and may constitute piracy. Here the author wants to say is that until the duration of 30 or 60 days, until the duration of trial, the shareware software can be freely used by the user, but after the expiry date of that 30 or 60 days time duration, the copyright exists there, the license would get activated and the user would not be able to afterwards use that software due to copyright or license issues. While in freeware, the user just have to agree with the license before the beginning or before the use of the software. Once the user has agreed with the terms and conditions of the license, now for a lifetime the user can use that software free of cost. Now when it comes to freeware software, all the features are freely and fully available to the user, while when it comes to shareware, some features are available for free trial, or shareware softwares allow limited use. To enable the rest of the features, after the expiry of 30 or 60 days time duration, the payment should be made by the user. Freeware is free of cost, and it is free of cost distributed among the people when it comes to distribution. While when it comes to shareware, it may or may not be freely distributed. It usually requires author's permission for distribution or redistribution. The user can use the freeware software without taking care of any time limit. While when it comes to shareware, it's free features, or it can be used freely for the user for around 30 to 60 days time duration without payment. While after the expiry of those 30 to 60 days, the user has to make payment for further use. Freeware is a free copyrighted software, while when it comes to shareware, some features are free for trial and covered by the copyright. It can also happen to freeware too. Acha ji, when it comes to freeware, again I'm talking about its disadvantage. The freeware software cannot be means the user can neither sell these freeware softwares, and the user cannot even make any changes in the source code of the freeware software. When it comes to shareware, it cannot be modified. Its source code cannot be modified or accessed by the user, and it may be either a cut down or a temporary version. Means the user can use its temporary version or some of its features for 30 to 60 days. So when it comes to its examples, browsers, Yahoo Messengers and Adobe Readers, etc. are the types or examples of freeware software, while WinZip or any types of antiviruses or firewalls or disk cleaners are the types of shareware softwares. Freeware refers to the software that anyone can download from the internet free of cost for free use for unlimited time, while sharewares are the softwares which give users a chance to try the software before buying it for a limited time period. Now, another difference we would be talking about is the difference between an open source software and a licensed software. We would be talking about the difference between open source software and a proprietary or licensed software. So now let's have a look. First difference is that Linux, Ubuntu, often OpenOffice.org, etc. These are the types of an open source software, while all the versions of Windows or all the softwares of MS Office are actually the types of licensed or proprietary software. Open source software can be purchased with its source code, means the source code is available to the user, while the licensed software cannot be purchased with its source code. Licensed software does not allow the user to access its source code. So when it comes to open source software, users can modify the software. Of course, when user has got the access to the source code, now that is very evident that the user can now change, modify or alter the source code of the open source software. While in licensed software, the users are not allowed to modify the software because the source code is not available to the user. So an open source software a user can get an open source software for free of charge. In some cases, not always, but in some cases, the user can get an open source software for free of charge. While when it comes to licensed software, a user always has to pay for the proprietary or licensed software in order to get it purchased from the market. An open source software can be installed freely into any type of computer, into any type of device, into any type of gadget, while a proprietary or licensed software, when it comes to a licensed software, it must have a license. A user needs to acquire acquire a license from the vendor before its installation into the computer. Means user is bound to take the license of that licensed software in order to get it installed into his computer. When it comes to open source software, no one is responsible for the maintenance of an open source software. Everybody can actually change and modify and use and correct the source code of the open source software. While when it comes to licensed or proprietary software, full support from the vendor is offered to the user if anything happens to the licensed software. Means now the vendor who actually sold you that software, now that shopkeeper or vendor is responsible for that software in order to fix that software. These are also some affiliated differences between the open source and between the proprietary or licensed software. That open source software refers to the software that is developed and tested through open collaboration by different users. Different users access different parts of source codes of the software, so that it acts upon it comes together as a collaboration, a combined effort. While when it comes to licensed software, it refers to the software that is solely owned by some individual organization actually who developed it. Anyone with the academic knowledge can actually access, inspect, modify and redistribute the source code of an open source software, while only when it comes to licensed or proprietary software, only the owner or publisher or the inventor or creator who holds the legal copyrights or property rights of the source code can actually access the licensed software. When it comes to open source, the project of that open source software is managed by an open source community of developers and programmers. When it comes to licensed software, the project or the software is managed by a closed group of individuals or a team that developed it. The point here actually indicates to a software development team that if a software is only developed by if that licensed software has been developed by only one software engineer, then that software code can only be managed or modified or changed or managed by that only one software engineer. But if that software is developed by a team of software engineers or developers, then that software would definitely be managed by those software team members, by a closed group of individuals. When it comes to open source, they are not aimed at, open source softwares are not aimed at unskilled users outside of the programming community. Interesting thing is that in order to understand the source code written in some high level language in order to develop a software, that open source code, that source code of course is written into some high level language, so that source code can only be understood by some technical software developer, software engineer, or those students who are actually studying those high level languages, so they can understand those source code things. So in order to understand that source code, a person needs to be relevant to those technical stuff. A person needs to be a programmer, developer. While when it comes to licensed software, they are focused on a limited market of both skilled and unskilled people. Means licensed softwares can be, as a user cannot access its source code, that's why they can only be purchased, and they can be purchased by either skilled person or an unskilled person. That doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, an unskilled or skilled person both can use the software. But when it comes to source code, that is something technical. Open source software provides better flexibility, which means more freedom, which encourages the innovation. While there is very limited scope of innovation with the restrictions and actually happening with licensed or proprietary software. And the examples are also written at the end of this thing, and you can see the examples too. Now we would discuss another difference between the open source and freeware software. We would discuss some of the differences between open source and freeware software. So now these differences are that freeware softwares are freely available softwares, but they are copyrighted. They have copyrights. While open source softwares are freely available with freely available source codes. They can be edited to make their own copyrights. Means here important thing is that any person who is actually editing the source code of an open source software, the person who is editing a certain part is actually getting a copyright for that certain part too. When it comes to freeware software, developers tend to use the word free with regard to the freedom afforded by the licensing scheme. While when it comes to open source software, developers use the word open in reference to the software's source code, but the license doesn't give the rights to reuse or repackage the source code. Another difference is that when it comes to freeware software, competitors have to build their versions from scratch. Means every software engineer has to build his own version of the software from scratch. When it comes to open source software, every user can just actually develop or build or modify or change the part of source code which actually is relevant to that developer. He does not need to change or modify all the source code, because one part is taken by or is getting changed by one developer, then the other part would be handled and changed and managed by some other developer. So people are changing the source code of some open source software actually relevant to their own needs. Means developers merge their own feature ideas into the open source application or into the open source app in a given or release cycle. So dear students, we are done for now. We are done with all the types of generally categorized softwares. We are done with open source software, licensed software, shareware software, and freeware software. So till this date, we are done with system software, we are done with application software, we are done with internet applications, and we are done with generally categorized softwares. So we are done with all the types of software, but we would discuss another type of software which is not like a software but an intermediate between the software and hardware, and that is firmware. So inshallah in our next lecture we would be discussing the firmware. Till then, Allah Hafiz, and thank you for listening to this lecture. Kindly try to listen all the lectures on time. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.